Hello, I'm Dr. Adria Sutherland. I am the Beeler Professor of Clarinet at Eastern Kentucky University, and today we are going to be going over the technical etude for the 2020 Clarinet All-State Audition music in the state of Kentucky. Make sure you have the correct edition of the music. This is Rose 32 Etudes, and this particular one is the one that has Melvin Warner as the editor. So, in this book, we, for the technical etude, are going to be playing number 6, Allegro risoluto. Okay, allegro means at a very brisk tempo, and risoluto actually means bold, strong, and resolute. So we want this etude to be quick and have a lot of strength to it. All right, it should be performed at quarter note equals 96, so make sure that you set your metronome appropriately. We start right at the beginning of this etude, and we play all the way up through the end of measure 31, where the repeat sign is. But for the auditions, you do not have to take the repeat, all right? So as soon as you're finished with the first time through that, you're done. I'm going to play it for you first, and I'm going to set my metronome at 96 just to make sure I'm keeping on track, and then we'll talk about some practice tips. And that's quarter note equals 96. All right, so that is all the way up through measure 31. Now, let's talk about some just general stylistic tips with this etude. First of all, yes, there's a lot of staccato notes in here, but don't try to play them too short. Staccato just means separated, so you want to make sure that you still give them enough length on them to where the tone comes through. If you try to play them too short, then you're going to sort of get this stopped up sound. You know, if you try to make them too pinched like that, you don't even really hear what the note is. So instead, so da-da-da-da, you can still have quite a bit of length on those staccato notes, and that pretty much goes throughout this entire excerpt. The next tip that I want to give you is, even though this looks like a technical exercise or a technical etude, you still want to make sure that you play it very, very musically. There's not really a lot of direction in this edition, so we have to do our own thing. So you just want to make some smart musical choices in here. Most of the time throughout these phrases, you're going to be crescendoing for the first 2 bars and then decrescendoing for the next 2 bars, okay? And that's just a general tip. Follow the line. So if such as in measure 8 and 9, you've got the staccato notes that are going all the way up into measure 10, you want to crescendo through those. So all the notes throughout this entire piece should either be going somewhere or coming from somewhere. All right, let's take it measure or phrase by phrase here. So the first one's kind of measures 1 through 4. Like I said before, you can crescendo for 2 measures and then decrescendo for the next 2 measures. And that's pretty much the same in measures 5. You want to crescendo through measures 5 and measure 6, all the way into measure 7. Decrescendo down to the low F sharp in measure 8, and then you can push back up again into the beginning of measure 10. So you want to just make sure that you're creating those shapes within the music so it doesn't just sound like a finger exercise. You still have to play it melodically. Let's see. Let's look down at, okay, so this first big section here, what the question I usually get with this etude is, where in the world am I supposed to breathe? Where do I breathe? So from the very beginning of it, all the way up until 15, 16, 17, 18, there aren't any rests there, right? So the easy answer to that is you have to take a big enough breath at the beginning of that section to last all the way up until measure 19, where you've got a big 2 beats of rest in a completely empty bar, and that sort of gives you a chance to collect yourself again. And you can do that. I just did it when I ran through it, but it's not easy. You really do have to tank up. You feel like you are filling up with air as much as your body can possibly hold. And then the other trick to that is that you have to manage your air throughout this section. So you cannot get too loud at any point in time. So yes, you have to make some musical choices, crescendos and decrescendos, but you cannot get too much because you're going to run out of air. Now, if you just can't do it, if you just can't make it, that's also okay. Here's my recommendation. In measure 6, after the first note of beat 2, you can take a quick catch breath there, all right? So if I start playing at measure 5, after that A right there is a really good place to just kind of sip some air really fast, but it's got to be so fast and it's going to throw you off when you're working with the metronome a little bit, so just know that in advance. Okay, so right before those last 3 16th notes, those will go up into the next measure. I think, in my opinion, that's kind of the only good place where you can take one. And it's still not very good, but if you have to breathe, you have to breathe. And so that's where I would recommend to take that, okay? Now the next big section, section 2 that we have, which starts on measure 20 and goes all the way to the end of, or the downbeat of measure 31, you can make that in one breath, I think. Just make sure that you're really tanking up with your air again. Take a really big breath and don't ever get too loud with it. That is the notey section. Just try to keep, a very nice tone throughout. Just try to maintain sound and just stay relaxed with a good hand position. All right, so other practice tips that I have with this, fingering wise, when you start using your C sharps and your B naturals throughout 25, 26, 27, 28, and 29, I put all of those on the right hand side. So C sharp, I'm using this guy right here. B natural, I'm using this right here, rather than trying to coordinate my left hand pinky. And the reason for that is that it keeps all the action in one hand, rather than trying to coordinate, this ring finger with this pinky. That just doesn't make sense, and you're not going to play quite as cleanly as you would if you're just doing that, just lifting it up and down on one hand. So if that's not a key that you're used to using, let this be the piece that gets you really good at it, okay? And again, that's just personal preference, but I think it makes it a lot easier to play it cleanly. So I would definitely work on that. The next practice tip I have is never, ever, ever, ever play it faster than you can play it accurately. You absolutely have to start technical pieces, this etude including, but all technical pieces, at a tempo that you can play it with 100% accuracy. Otherwise, you're going to be learning incorrect patterns and notes. So if you have to start it at quarter note equals 40, or whatever the lowest number that your metronome will go, that is okay. Just know that you are learning the correct patterns and you just gradually increase it as you can. So when it comes to increasing tempo, I like to follow what I call the rule of 5. Don't ever scoot the metronome up to a higher tempo until you can play a passage through 5 times in a row with 100% accuracy. So if I've got my metronome on quarter note equals 60 and I play it through, and I wouldn't do this with enormous chunks of music. I would sort of keep it to smaller phrases when I'm using this rule. But say I want to play, measures 1 through 8, for example, and I want to try to get it maybe moved from 60 up to 65. I have to play those measures through 1 time, 2 times, 3 times, 4 times. And if you goof up on the 4th time, you've got to start over. Again, 1, 2, 3, 4, all the way up to 5. If you can get it through 5 times with 100% accuracy to where it feels easy under your fingers, then you can increase your tempo, and only then. Otherwise, you're going to be increasing it before you're ready, and that leads to just glitches, technical errors under your fingers, and it just doesn't feel good to play it if it's too fast for you. Next thing is maintain a great sound throughout. So even though it's the technical one, we still have to work on tone. You still have to work on nice warm sound, lovely round staccatos, and also a really close hand position is going to help you out too. So make sure that you're playing in front of a mirror sometimes, or record yourself on your computer so you can see yourself. And make sure your fingers are staying nice and close, particularly on this etude. When we get into that second section, it's very, very important there, because if you're flipping and and flapping all over the place, then you're not going to get those to come out cleanly. And the last thing is to record yourself. Record yourself. Make sure, and this goes for the lyrical etude too, make sure that you can really hear yourself making those musical choices. Do you have a nice sound? Is it even throughout all the registers? And you're likely to find out like, oh wow, I really thought that I was making a crescendo there, and maybe I'm not doing as much. Things always sound differently inside our head, right? And you have to over exaggerate musical choices and phrasing and things like that in order to get them to come across to the listener. That's also going to be a really great practice for you to do, because I believe that this year, so I've been told the auditions are going to be recorded. So the sooner you get used to that process, the easier it'll be. Okay, so that is your Technical Etude number 6 from 32 Studies for Clarinet. If you have questions about this etude, please feel free to email me, adria.sutherland@eku.edu. I'd be happy to talk to you about anything all-state music related, or just if you have questions about clarinet. We can also set up a Zoom lesson if you would like to do so. And if you're somebody who's interested in coming and visiting campus, I would love to host you as a socially distanced, of course, this year. But happy to talk to you about any of that. And all you got to do is just let me know. Okay? Hope you have a great afternoon. Thank you.